Hey everyone, Richard Taylor here for FCP TV, and I think this is the first one I've had for 2021. But over here to this way, I'm not sure which direction it is on screen. It's opposite for me. We have Jim Tierney from Digital Anarchy. We're going to talk about some of his Final Cut Pro plugins after I turn this countdown timer off. There we go. Today, he has two of them we're going to talk about specifically. We're going to talk about Beauty Box is the one, right?
Yep, that's one of them.
And the other one is Flicker Free. But let's do a little bit of background first. So How long has Digital Anarchy been around, Jim?
We've been around since 2001. That's when we released our first plugin. We originally started off doing stuff for After Effects, and then broadened things out to the video editing apps a little bit to FCP and Premiere and all that. Although I've been doing video production software for since like 1995. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what was before Digital Anarchy then?
Mostly a company called MetaTools.
Okay.
That did like Kai's Power Tools and Bryce. And stuff like that.
Yeah. I remember that.
But we also did Final Effects, which was kind of the first After Effects plugin set. And then I worked for Brian Maffick's company for a while, Total Training. We did some After Effects plugins there as well. And then, around 2001, branched off on my own and started Digital Anarchy.
And ever since then, that's what you've been doing?
Just doing the Anarchist thing, yep.
Now, do you edit yourself?
Not really. I mean, I edit our tutorials, or at least a lot of them. But I am not by training an editor. I did do freelance motion graphics for a little while, but I'm a little bit better at developing the tools than using them per se. So.
Right. Well, I was just asking because I'm always curious what people's backgrounds are. So you're doing plugins. So the plugins that you have, well, you have multiple plugins, but the ones we're going to talk about mainly are the couple for Final Cut, and then we're also going to talk about your one transcription plugin that is for Premiere. As a matter of fact, before we go into details about that, I remember I started getting emails from you guys a couple years ago, and I kept saying, "Hey, get this over to Final Cut." And then they'll be interested at that point, right?
Yeah.
There's why not Final Cut for your transcriptive?
Well, originally Final Cut didn't have a way for us to do it the way that we wanted to do it, which was kind of a fully integrated solution into the app. Which at the time Premiere did. They had this HTML5 API.
Okay.
I mean, at this point, Final Cut does have something similar to that, but we're getting to it.
Okay. Oh, you are.
It's been a big project. It's a non-trivial thing to get all that stuff integrated.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't know you were working on that for Final Cut. That's interesting. We'll talk more about that in a little bit then. But I just wanted to touch on that because I was curious why I was getting emails for Premiere. And I kept saying, bring us over the Final Cut, bring us over the Final Cut. Yeah. And then so apparently you are. So the plugins you have now, Beauty Box and Flicker Free.
Yep.
Why do we need Flicker Free in 2021? Wasn't that NTSC television? That was all flickery and stuff sometimes?
That's true, but with the advent of LED lights, you're now seeing flicker show up pretty much everywhere. Especially the cheaper LED lights. I mean, the problem that we see, that's the most common problem that we see. There's plenty of other places where flicker shows up, be it slow motion or many other or fluorescent lights or whatever. But the most common thing we're seeing is people not being aware that they either have LED lights in the background or, you're shooting in a hotel, you're shooting a wedding or something, and the hotel has LED lights, they're dimmed, and that just causes havoc with the camera shutter. And
so I'm presuming the LED, then they have a certain frequency that's not coinciding with the shutter. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, right. So it's a lot like shooting or filming a video monitor.
Right.
The monitor has a refresh rate, and so it causes these rolling bands that happen on the screen.
Right.
But LED lights have a refresh rate much like the computer monitor, and so if they're not, if you're not calibrated to what they're doing, you're going to end up with potentially rolling bands. So.
Very interesting. So I was going to ask you about fluorescent lights because I know about them, but wasn't even thinking about LEDs. I didn't realize that they had a frequency like that was causing issues. So and they're, like you said, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere now. And so like, even if you're controlling the lights, on your shot, a lot of times we see it's like, all right, there's an exit light in the background. There's other types of lighting in the background that, the camera person wasn't paying attention to when they were filming it, because everything on kind of the small set looked fine. But, you're shooting in, you mentioned the National Archives earlier, you take a camera crew in there and you're shooting, you got your lights set up, but there's a display in the background that's using LED lights.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden that's going like, flickering like crazy. So
I use a GH5. It has a small little LED screen or whatever, the flip out screen. Would I be able to tell flicker on something that small when I'm shooting?
Probably not. I mean, that's what gets people is that it's a pretty subtle effect. It's not like a neon light where it's flashing on and off, off, or it's super obvious. It's a pretty subtle effect, and if you're not looking for it, especially if it's like a display case in the background, you may just totally miss it. And that's why even guys that are very professional and know what they're doing sometimes get bit by this, because it's something that's not quite within the set, and that's what they're paying attention to. And
right. Because if I didn't see it on the monitor, that I know, look for LED lights. I know to look for the fluorescence. I know that. But now that I know that, or of course another monitor in the background, any kind of signage, now that I know that, you've made me aware. Now I'll be aware. I won't even pay attention to my monitor. I said, well, get this out of here, move this out of the way, cover this up, whatever. Yeah. So how do you take care of that? Is that AI somehow or something else that you're doing?
No, that's just traditional computer graphics. I mean, what we're doing is analyzing a wide range of frames. So, Flicker Free will potentially analyze up to 21 different frames. The frame that you're on, and then say 10 frames previous to it and 10 frames after it. And then we sort of figure out what the right luminance is, and then correct the current frame. And then for every frame, we're just doing that moving average, essentially.
Oh, I see. I see. Isn't that interesting? So it's not AI then for this plugin?
It's not AI. Yeah. Right now, we're not really using AI for anything. Well, we are, I guess, for the transcription tool, but for the computer graphic stuff, we're still traditional pixel pushing algorithms.
But it works. I mean, I've heard your plugin for years. I've heard of for years. Every time I see that question, how do I get rid of this flicker? And I see Flicker Free.
Yeah.
Everybody mentions that all the time. And how many platforms? You do Final Cut, you do Premiere for Flicker Free. What else do you do? Resolve?
We do Resolve, and then we do Avid as well.
Okay.
Those are kind of the four platforms that we generally support.
Now, when you're developing for those four, just take Flicker Free. Is one easier than the others, or two easier than the others? Is one more difficult? Just from the development point of view.
I wouldn't say they're more difficult, but Adobe and FCP are kind of our biggest platforms, so we tend to do those first.
Okay.
And then we get to Resolve, and then we get to Avid. They don't all drop at the same time, just because there is a bit of work there's a bit of work involved in getting getting it up and running and testing it and all that stuff. So we tend to focus on Premiere and Final Cut first, and then get to Resolve and Avid a little bit later.
So with those four companies, do you get more help from one company versus the other? I mean, Premiere seems pretty upfront about stuff. They seem to be pretty proactive about getting people engaged, and Final Cut seems sometimes just the opposite. From the outside, outside.
Yeah, I mean, like Adobe's always been great. Apple has not always been great. But recently they've gotten much, much better about communicating with developers. We had pretty great interaction with them prior to the 10.5 M1 release.
Okay.
They were very proactive about reaching out to us, and that's something I really appreciate. So they've gotten much better over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. That's good. What about Avid and Blackmagic? Blackmagic also seems very proactive about their SDK and stuff.
Yeah, they're okay. I would say that we get a little bit more support from Adobe and Apple, but
Okay.
but they all have good SDKs. They all have good development support. So
Okay.
yeah, it's they're all pretty good about it. I mean, they realize that plugins are pretty critical to their
Absolutely.
ecosystem. So
It seems, from the outside, it seems like Final Cut has the biggest plugin, 3D party plugin landscape. Is that true?
Yeah.
Does it?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, certainly I would say Adobe and FCP are kind of both. They both have pretty big ecosystems in terms of the third-party plugins. A lot of the stuff that you see for Adobe is also for After Effects. I mean, if you consider the After Effects,
that's true. That's true.
The After Effects scripting market, then I would say Adobe's actually bigger. But if you're just comparing Premiere to Final Cut, I'd say it's pretty close. I mean,
because my effects plugin palette in Final Cut is humongous. It's got literally over 1,000 items in it. Now, some of those are packages that have multiple, iterations in them, but you can do a count, and it's like over 1,000. So I'm thinking, wow, and I'm not buying everything. I try to be selective, because of financial reasons. I try to be selective in what I buy, and I just don't buy everything. But I'm a sucker for titles and lower thirds if they're good.
Yep.
If they're a good quality one that I see, and then some other things, transition packs I buy, and people talk about using motion and stuff, and I'm like, you know what, I don't have time to learn motion. I'm gonna pay Mark Spencer $35 for a plugin before I'm going to sit down for 2 or 3 hours to try to figure something out, because I spend most of my time in Final Cut and then Logic Pro. Those are my two pro apps, and that's more than enough attention. And then I made the decision in December, Christmas time. I got Resolve Studio license.
Ah, cool.
And there's a reason for. Yeah, I figured it certainly. They have this great deal right now where you can get the speed editor and the studio license for the same price, $295. So you get both, and both of them cost $295 on their own. So I say, well, now's the time. I was going to wait and see if I got a Blackmagic camera, and I'd pick up a copy that way, but I didn't get the camera. And I said, now's a good time. And I started learning it, and let me tell you something. I'm very impressed. I'm more impressed than I thought I was going to be. Just starting the tutorials and stuff with the Resolve, and personally, I like complex software, my pro software, to be complex. Logic is very, very complex.
Yeah,
and Resolve seems to be that same way. Final Cut, sometimes it's a little bit frustrating because you can't get in there and do some of the things you need to do. And so I understand the simplicity aspect as well, but Logic has an advanced preference. You can turn on all these advanced features.
Yep.
So if you don't want the advanced features, you don't turn them on, and it's a simpler interface. I wish Final Cut would do the same thing. Give the pros that want it a little more access to some of the things.
Yeah, a little bit more control.
Sure. Yeah, a little more control, and the ability to do things like saving a browser layout. You customize the browser layout, you can't save it. There's in Final Cut, you can't save the actual browser layout. Something like that. When there's a couple of other things, preferences like fit to fill or whatever. I'd like to be able to select that as my default preference. Can't do it. So just things, control like that. But who knows what they're doing in 2021? I
don't think anybody knows what anybody's doing in 2021.
Well, that's very true. That's very true.
Oh,
So one of the things that happened in 2020 was the 10.5 came out. And since the vast majority of Final Cut users are on Intel, they're not on the M1 chip, we're like, what is this 10.5? It's got like this many features or whatever on it. Yeah. But I realized after the fact that what seems to have happened, not being on the inside, but what seems to have happened is the marketing team got that 10.5 name and used it to launch the Silicon Mac version of Final Cut versus for the last 9 years when we got a full point update, right? We had giant features, it's like a brand new app each time. So that's what we're used to because that's what the Final Cut Pro team has done for the last 9 years. So I think what's going to happen, marketing team got 10.5 with this many little things that happened, mostly for the M1 Mac. And I think we're in for the full feature update we were expecting for 10.5 in 2021. That's what I'm expecting.
Well, I'll say that the M1 release is a pretty big feature in terms of the engineering time it took them to bust that out.
Right.
So I mean that's where they're. I mean on the Intel side, it probably doesn't justify the full point release, but I know the amount of work they put into the M1 side, and it was a lot of work. So
no, I understand that, but every app has to do that.
Yeah.
Every app manufacturer that wants to be on the Mac platform has to do the universal binary to be effective, to stay on it. So that's not unique to Final Cut. Mm-hmm. All the app, all of them have to do it. The other thing, they could have called it 10.49.11. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think usually when you're releasing an update, you're kind of looking at how much work you put into it, not necessarily the feature set. Adobe did a pretty big release last year as well, but most of it was performance, kind of under the hood stuff and cleaning things up. And the feature set was kind of smallish, but it improved the stability of the app and a bunch of other things. So, it's just one of those things.
Well,
you're looking at how much engineering time it took.
We always want stability and performance improvement. That should be the number one thing with all updates. But anyway, I think that since they took 10.5 for that, I think we got the feature update that we expected for 10.5 coming hopefully in 2021 with the features. And then it's just a matter of, it was just a naming thing. Like you said, I understand it takes a lot of time, but so does every other app. What about Motion? What about Compressor? What about all the other apps that work? They all have to do the same thing. They all have to do universal binary. So, but that was curious because it didn't affect the vast majority. Final Cut announced 2.5 million users and seats. I'm sorry, they called it seats in 2018. 2.5 million installed seats of Final Cut Pro in 2018. So now we're talking 3 million to 4 million. The vast majority of those are Intel.
Yes.
Vast majority, and they will be for years because people are not going to jump on the M1 in the millions like they're already on Intel. So that 10.5 update didn't do much for the vast majority of them. I understand it was necessary, but it didn't do much for the vast majority. I guess that's my point. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to 2021, see what they come out with. Now, here's the interesting thing. Logic updated from 10.4.9 or 10.4.8 to 10.5 in the middle of May last year. Right in the heat of the pandemic, they had a major update middle of May. 6 months later, they went to 10.6.
Yep.
They went from 10.5 to 10.6 in 6 months, which I've never seen a pro app do before. So that was curious. So I'm thinking maybe Final Cut's going to do the same thing. 10.5 was the M1 thing, and then sometime in 2021 they might come out with the 10.6 or whatever they want to call it. Who the heck knows? You can't figure them out, right? I mean, you can try. Sometimes I get it right, but other times it's just whatever they do.
Well, I'm sure the Logic thing had a lot to do with NAB because everybody's still on the NAB release schedule, even though NAB is actually not happening.
But it is in 2021.
In October, yeah.
Yeah, in October.
But I think you're going to see a lot of people still release stuff in April, just because that's been the plan for the last X number of years, and that's just how it goes. So it's just funny to see everybody kind of acting like NAB is still happening, but
I see what the schedule was. Well, Blackmagic, they just release these things all the time. They just keep on updating and updating and have whatever. Now, I presume you've been to NAB with Digital Anarchy, or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, last year was kind of the first year. I mean, obviously the first year that we haven't gone since, 2001. So.
Okay. Well, if they do have it live in October, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but we'll see. I mean, if I do end up there, I'll certainly come by and stop by wherever you are, your booth or whatever.
Yeah. No, it's as much as I complain about trade shows, it's like I actually miss seeing everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm like,
all the walking and stuff, and I got to come from the East Coast to the West Coast and airports, but I miss it. I miss it as well.
I definitely missed hanging out with folks. So hopefully we're back. Hopefully we get back to that, in 2021.
So when you work with Flicker Free, is that a plugin that you apply per clip, or can you in Final Cut, or do you apply it to a project to use?
It's per clip.
Okay.
You generally want to, it's a little bit render heavy, especially depending on the settings that you have. So you usually just want to apply it to the section of the clip that, has the flicker you're trying to get rid of. And if that's the entire clip, it's the entire clip. But, very often it's not, it's just a portion of it. So you want to just apply it to the section that, needs the flicker reduction in it.
That makes complete sense. So do you cut the clip and then you put it?
Yeah, you just make an edit and then drop the filter onto that edit. And then you're just rendering out for that section and not for the entire timeline or the entire clip or whatever.
Sure. And now, does it have any kind of real-time playback before you render or not?
A little. It kind of depends on the settings. One of the things with 2.0, which we just released a couple months ago, is that it's all GPU accelerated. So if you're using the kind of older algorithm, the 1.0 algorithm, it's much, much faster. It's like, on HD, it's close to real time. It's not quite, but if you add in like some of the new algorithms to deal with stuff like moving cameras and moving subjects and stuff like that, then there's really not much of a real time playback. Then in that case, you definitely have to kind of pre-render it out.
And is rendering 1 times real time, 2 times, do you think, average?
It depends. I mean, it could be if you really drop in some of the new settings, it could be, 4 to 1. Okay,
so it's pretty it can be pretty intensive then.
It can be very intensive. It can definitely slow down the your rendering times. But on the other hand, it's like if you've got some of these problems, there's really no other way to fix it.
Right.
And if it's an all-night render versus going out and reshooting, you're probably going to do the all-night render, right?
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. When I teach,
especially if it's a wedding, or something, and it's like can't exactly go out and do a reshoot. So
when I taught Final Cut Pro classes for Future Media Concepts in Washington, and some other places, and if the students would come in and they had bad audio, they said, "What can I do?" I said, "Go ahead and reshoot it." Why weren't you monitoring your audio when you first started? But of course, you can't do that for a wedding or whatever, like you said. Yeah. So now let's talk about Beauty Box. Beauty Box is certainly interesting, and it's kind of an industry standard, isn't it? It seems like a lot of big companies.
We were one of the first. I mean, we were actually kind of the first company to release a beauty plugin that actually worked. I mean, there were some out there that just kind of did a blur, just kind of a blur pass. Right. But we actually took it to a little bit different level in terms of using face detection and trying to keep the skin tones or the skin texture, and really just create this kind of layer of digital makeup that creates a very realistic look. And so, then now it's been out, I don't know, I guess 8 years, 9 years, and it is a bit of an industry standard at this point.
It seems like it because you have a lot of clients on your website. People. Yeah. Music videos and stuff, and some of them I'm kind of surprised they were I didn't think they would need it, but you could see the improvement even in people that are younger, let's say. I mean, somebody.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, but that's the thing about video. It's like you shine, basically spotlights on people, and
Well, that's true.
It creates a very unrealistic, skin texture, partially because of the way that we watch video. Because, if you're interactive, if I'm just talking to you in person, I'm not really looking at your face and looking at all the pores and everything else. But if you're just watching a video, it's like all of a sudden it's like you have the kind of mental bandwidth to just go like, wow, that guy's face is really messed up. He's got pimples right here and like all this stuff, right?
Right.
I'm not saying you, I'm just saying.
No, I know, I understand.
But so it does help even if someone's a little bit younger. It's like if you put video lights on somebody and film a close up, it's everything pops out, and Beauty Box is really a way of just kind of like dialing that back so that you get a more realistic skin texture.
Right. So I noticed you have one of your diagrams had different masks for different areas. The forehead had a mask, cheeks had a mask, whatever.
Yep.
Can you track those? Are they trackable if the subject moves, or do you have to do it manually, or how does that work?
Well, that's, you can track those. That's not actually part of Beauty Box. That's either part of Premiere or FCP. I think we have one tutorial that uses SpliceX from Roger Bolton's company.
Roger Bolton, right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So those, in that case, you have a trackable mat, and then you're just kind of setting it up on the first frame on the cheeks and the forehead. And then, you'll track that forward. Of course, if they move their head or turn, then you've got to kind of recalibrate it.
Sure.
But that's one way of, so it takes a little bit more work, but that is one way of getting a little bit more realistic look instead of just letting Beauty Box kind of create the, facial mask.
Right.
Because you can, if you just do that, depending on the settings, you can start to lose a little bit of detail, like in the nose area and stuff like that.
Okay.
So, if you're looking at guys that are doing, really high-end music videos or commercials or stuff like that, generally they're creating those masks just on the cheeks and the chin and just where they think they need it,
right?
Not necessarily applying it to everything. But that is a little bit more time-consuming. So, you definitely have the option of doing it both ways.
So do you have to apply a separate instance of the plugin for each area, or does your plugin cover multiple areas, just one instance of it?
It depends on the host app that you're using. In Final Cut, I don't recall off the top of my head, unfortunately, but in Premiere, you do have to use a separate instance of the plugin because each one needs a separate mask.
Okay. So that's what I was wondering.
That's not true. I'm wrong. You can have multiple plugin masks for the same plugin instance, and so but each mask has to be tracked separately. So you create one mask, track that, create another mask, track that, but you only need one instance of the plugin.
Okay, so one instance, and you can do multiple areas of the face, chin, forehead, shiny. Does it take care of shiny foreheads?
It helps.
Okay.
It does not. There is a shine removal function to it.
Okay.
So it will take the edge off in some cases. If it's really blown out, it really can't do a whole lot with that. But if you just have a small area that's a little bit on the shiny side, then it will do a pretty nice job of helping that.
Now, what about HD versus 4K? Is the 4K more intensive to do?
It's just more render intensive. I mean, you're rendering out more pixels, right? So
yeah,
with anything like that, it's if you go from SD is probably totally real time. If you go to HD, it's mostly real time. If you go up to 4K, then maybe it's 2:1, something like that. But you've got more pixels, so it just takes longer to process all that stuff.
Now, since we're talking about resolution, have you tried it with the Blackmagic 12K? You know,
Oh, man.
they always kill me with Blackmagic. Those guys, you know, they have a new
12K.
camera coming out. Everybody's saying, what's it going to be, a 6K or an 8K? And they go, nah, we're going to go 12K. 12K. I can't imagine the render times on something like that would, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. we're at 12K already, huh?
Well, they are.
Yeah.
I think it's not that expensive. A camera is at 10 or 12,000 with lenses and stuff. I forget. But what about 6K then? So 4K's more render than 6K. You work with 6K as well?
Yeah, I mean, all the plugins are resolution independent. I mean, you can throw it at a 12K image or whatever, but you know, it's gonna take longer to render, and you have to be cognizant of, you know, since everything is GPU accelerated now, you know, how much memory does your GPU have? And, you know, if you're really doing like 8K or 12K or something like that, you know, you want to have a GPU that's got 12 or 24 gigs of RAM on it, because, you know, Final Cut's using that, we're using it, you know, every software developer that does video stuff is trying to use the GPU. And, you know, if we have to fall back to the CPU, it's going to be, you know, longer render times. If we can do everything on the GPU, then things get, you know, much faster. But, you know, if we're falling back to CPU, then it's going to be, you know, you're back to these long renders.
Now, since we're talking about that, what about the M1 Max? I'm sure your plugins work on the M1 Max now.
Yeah, we have beta builds for M1.
Okay.
You know, we're still kind of testing them out and stuff, but they do seem to work. There's one or two features missing because of the FCP API.
Okay.
There's some bugs there because, of course, they just released it. We just released it. So there's some bugs on the Apple side that they're resolving that, you know, the next release of Final Cut should take care of all that.
Now, do you have a native version you're working on, or is this Rosetta or whatever that translation is?
No, this is universal. I mean, these are actual silicon builds.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think the video apps work very well through Rosetta or whatever they're calling it. I know Premiere doesn't.
Right.
It's right. You know, once you start getting into pushing pixels around, the whole emulation thing really, you know, doesn't work so well. But
it's not. It's not meant for video production. It's meant for Word documents or something.
Yeah, exactly right. So, you know, for that stuff, it works fine, but for the video apps, you know, not so much. So, yeah, so if we release an M1 build, it's definitely going to be, you know, native or, you know, a universal build or whatever they want to call it. Are you
planning on supporting Intel for a couple years like Apple is? I mean, Apple.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not expecting people to like just jump on the M1. I mean, like, the machines are okay, but, you know, we're seeing the performance isn't spectacular. It's all right, but it's kind of funny because you know, I'm seeing all these articles about like the M1 screaming fast and all this stuff, and what they're talking about is it's screaming fast for web browsing. Not
well, they can do one thing fast.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then you start getting down into the benchmarks, and it's like it's almost as fast as a 1.5-year-old iMac. Like,
right.
All right.
That,
yeah. When you get into video editing and the GPU processing and all that stuff, it's like they're solid machines. I mean, for the price point, they're fine. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, they're good machines.
Right.
But,
no, absolutely. But they are entry level. Yeah.
They are entry level. If you're doing like serious video editing, they probably are not the best machine. I would think at this point.
Right.
You know, we'll see what they come out with in the next year or so.
Exactly. I'm waiting on the 16-inch version and see what, because first off, I'm not going to buy a Mac with two Thunderbolt ports. That ain't going to happen. And then the other thing is 16 gigabytes of RAM. I know it uses RAM differently. I know that. Yeah. But I have a Mac Pro that I'm streaming on. I got 112 gigabytes of RAM. I'm using 40 right now. Well, I'm using 40 because of this. Is this? Oh, wait a minute. I got Let me show you my screen. This is my screen. See, I have a 34-inch LG monitor, and I've got all this stuff running. I got my camera, I got this, I got the audio interface. But this is what first off, I love 34-inch screens. I really, really like them. I don't know how to get back to anything less. People that are using 13-inch MacBook Pros, I don't understand how you do that sometimes. I mean, if you had to, if you want to, whatever. But I'm not used to. I'm used to at least a 15 or 16 MacBook. I have a 15-inch that I'll probably be trading in for the M2 chip, whatever it is. But I got to have 4 Thunderbolt ports, and I've got to have at least 32 gigabytes of RAM. I'm sorry. I don't care what the architecture. I understand that, but that's what I'm waiting for. So have you seen, what about the graphics performance of these M1s? Is it about the same?
It's a little bit mixed. The GPU is pretty underpowered. If you look at the GPU benchmarks, they're not great. And I mean, again, if you're if you're editing YouTube videos, it's fine. It's a great machine. Right. But if you're getting into anything that's even remotely graphics heavy, you're probably going to want to stick with an Intel machine that has one of the dedicated AMD cards or AMD GPUs, because that's just going to give you generally better performance with all the GPU accelerated effects and stuff like that. If you're just doing a single track of video with like one effect on it, I've got an iMac Pro right here. And it's like, in some cases it doesn't compare badly, but then you start kind of like layering stuff on and getting into more complex projects, and that's where the M1 really kind of, just really kind of bogs down. The iMac Pro just kind of keeps on rolling through, and it's not, it's easy peasy for it.
Well, like the Mac Pro that I have, whenever I see these posts about the new Macs are just so fast, they're much better than all the other Macs. And then I put up this post of one of the YouTubers did 16 6K videos on a 16K timeline. 16, tracks of 6K video on a 16. I said, let me see one of those things do this. Because they're not, of course they can't. Right. But I mean,
it's just, it's funny because it's like, like I was saying, they're talking about fast web browsing. I'm just like, it's like putting high octane gas into a Prius and getting excited about that. I just don't. Okay, but web browsing is not what I want my computer to do fast. So,
we just got a question here. Is it still worth it or intelligent as a choice to buy a new iMac 27 latest Intel chip? It most certainly is if you need it now. If you can wait a little while and see what Apple does in 2021. That's what I'm doing. But if you can, Tim Cook already said the Mac OS is going to be supporting Intel for years to come. Yep. So that's 2 more revisions at least of Mac OS. Next September, next fall, and the fall after that are still going to be supporting Intel Macs. And that likely means Final Cut will as well. They're not going to drop Mac support, and it's not going to change. So if you need an iMac right now, that 27 is really, really looking good. I would get the 27 iMac over the iMac Pro. But the iMac only has 2 Thunderbolt ports. The iMac Pro has 4. The iMac has 2. I had a 2017 iMac for years that I was my main machine. I didn't like the trash can Mac Pro. I never appealed to me. And I
was not a fan of that. But
well, here's the problem. What are they going to do with the Apple Silicon version of the Mac Pro? Please, Apple.
I feel sorry for the people that went out and bought the Intel Mac Pro that just came out and spent like $30,000 on that thing. It's like
I paid 10.5 for mine, but I have 8 PCIe slots. Okay, so here's what I don't want. The Apple Silicon version of the Mac Pro. I don't want them going but make the trash can too. where you can't replace the RAM, where you can't replace the GPU, where you can't replace this, when you can't replace that, and you have no PCIe slots because you already did that, and you came back to the Mac Pro. So please keep the Mac Pro a Pro machine. However, I think there's room between the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro for a new Mac. Just call it the Macintosh, right? A desktop that's in between the two.
Yeah.
You know, there's certainly a market there. I might have bought that if it was available rather than the Mac Pro, but I was super excited when they showed that Mac Pro. And I was talking to people like, I had Gary Adcock on here talking about, before it came out, and we were saying, I say, how many PCIe slots would you expect? He said at least 4. I said, yeah, that's probably true. And they came out with 8.
It's a lot of slots.
Don't go backwards. Don't go back to that trash can too. We don't want to see that with the Mac Pro. Keep the Pro, and maybe put something in between. A Mac Mini Pro, little stackable something. They have lots of room there, I think, for that.
Yeah, now, they can do some interesting things. But I mean, just jumping really quick back to the Intel thing. I mean, we're going to support Intel for a while. I mean, like I don't see Apple dropping Intel support for probably a good 4 to 5 years.
That's what I think too.
It's if you look back at the PowerPC transition, they supported PowerPC for at least 5 years. So I don't think anybody buying an Intel Mac now has anything really to worry about in terms of not being able to get software or OS updates for it.
So the question, is it worth it? It absolutely is worth it, especially if you need it now. Don't worry about it. If you can wait a little while, doesn't hurt to wait, because the Intel Mac will still be there. The price may come down a little bit, and then you get to see what they come out with. Apple is certainly going to release a new Apple Silicon Mac or two in 2021. I'm going to say probably, I don't know, maybe the MacBook Pro, the 16-inch, 15-inch, 16-inch, and then maybe just the regular iMac. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, the iMac Pro, does that use Xeon chips like the Mac Pro does, the server chips?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that's a different beast. That's not going to take an M1 chip.
The iMac Pro that we've got is pretty nice. It's a good machine.
Yeah. That would have been the one I would have got if I didn't get the Mac Pro, but I got the Mac Pro. I got it over a year ago. I got it in 2019, and I got it for a couple of reasons. Number one, I had a 2017 iMac, and I disliked the 2 Thunderbolt ports. I didn't like that at all. But at the time, Apple had a year ago December, they had you get 6% back on any Apple purchase if you use the Apple Card. Yeah. So I got a 6% discount right off the bat buying the Mac Pro. They had that special 2 year when it first came out. So that was a nice little incentive.
Yeah, we always buy our Macs through the refurbished section of the Apple
absolutely.
Store.
Absolutely. It's the same Apple warranty, and they're all refurbed by Apple, and they run great. I do the
usually
exact same
save
thing.
10 to 20% on them, and it's a good deal. Sorry about
Absolutely. That. So, do your plugins? Since your plugins work on Premiere, do they also work on the PC?
Oh yeah, we're pretty platform agnostic. We're Mac, PC, Adobe, Apple, Blackmagic.
Is that different builds of your plugin for the Mac and the PC? I didn't even think about that.
They're definitely different. I mean, they're definitely different builds. But if you buy, one of our plugins, it works on either platform, Mac or Windows. So if you're on Windows and you switch to Mac or vice versa, you can take your plugins along with you.
So I haven't had a Windows machine for a long time. When I started college, community college at night, I learned on the PC. As a matter of fact, the first NLE I ever used, I was a tape-to-tape, deck-to-deck editor from a local cable system. We used SVHS decks, and we had 3 decks and everything. And then the first thing I used was Premiere, because Final Cut wasn't out then. It was Premiere on the PC. And it was a little teeny postage stamp, 320 by whatever 240 little video, and they wouldn't
Back
work.
in the
They
day.
would crash and everything. It was just like, oh, it was so frustrating. But then Final Cut came out, and then Premiere dropped support for the Mac for a couple years. I think it was the PowerPC Intel switch over. They didn't something to do with that, if I'm not mistaken.
They rewrote Premiere from the ground up, and I think, because FCP was so strong at that point, I think they just decided to focus on Windows first, and then once they had the Windows app in a good place, that's when they came back to the Mac.
Right.
But actually, I think them coming back to the Mac was partially because Apple dropped FCP 7, and at the time, it took a little bit for FCP 10 to kind of get its legs, and I think a lot of people switched at that point in time.
I think that you're right. I think that Final Cut Pro 7 was, well, it depends on what market you're talking about. Final Cut Pro 7 seemed to have a lot of traction in places that Final Cut Pro 10 has not gained after all these years. Now, 10's been out for nine and a half years. Okay.
Yeah, no,
2011, June 2011 came out. So it's been out for 9.5 years. It'll be 10 years this June, but it's still struggling sometimes. It's probably just a perception thing. I mean, I use it, and it's a fantastic application. I prefer, it's still my go-to NLE, but as I'm learning Resolve, I'm like, this isn't too bad. I really like Resolve as well, so we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'll use both for different things. But there's things. Go ahead.
Yeah, Resolve's always been super strong with color.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Doing color correction. I mean, that's what it originally started out as. So it's always been great for that, and they've gotten much stronger on the editing side as well. So it's a pretty solid app these days.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with it. I still, the first thing I go for is Final Cut always, because I've been doing Final Cut since version 1, so that's like 20 years, 21 years at this point. So, yeah. And then I also use Lumafusion, if you're familiar with that, on the iPad.
Mm-hmm.
Another a very, very, very sophisticated NLE, especially for the iPad. I was amazed every time I used that. It's like, this is incredible that it's doing all this stuff on the iPad.
Yeah, there's some good apps out there for iOS for sure.
Now, you have a beauty box, and you have transcriptive, which we've talked about for Premiere, and that's Premiere only at this point, right? It's not.
That is
Resolve.
Still Premiere. That's still Premiere only. Resolve has the same problem that FCP originally had, is they don't really have an API that lets us build that within the app itself.
Okay.
You could do stuff like, use a web browser and then transfer an XML file and stuff like that. But I don't really like that workflow. If we're going to do something like that, I'd much rather just build it into the app itself, so that you get a lot better interaction, and it's just a better user experience, I think.
And I'm surprised that Resolve doesn't allow you to do that. Of course, Avid doesn't either, does it?
No. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure where Resolve is with that. I think they're probably working on something like that, but right now, Premiere's had it for a few years. FCP added it in 2019 at some point, and so we really do need to kind of circle back around and look at and build something out for FCP, but
so
it's been a lot of work.
Yeah, everything is a lot of work. So before I ask you another question, let me ask you this first. Do you have any new plugins on the horizon that we haven't seen yet?
Not so much. There's Flicker Free. We just came out with Flicker Free. We're working on update to Beauty Box. And so hopefully that's coming soon. And then there's some other stuff in the pipeline that, it's a little bit too early to announce, but
right.
But we're always working on new stuff. So
okay. So transcriptive. So when I go to do transcriptions for Final Cut, there's multiple apps out there you can use. What why are there so many? They seem to have all come up in 2018 and 2019, and then 2020, I guess. That's when they started happening. Now, I understand the need for them. When I worked at the National Archives, we had to caption everything we did. Yep. So I understand. I've been doing that for a long time. Why all of a sudden, it seems like there's a lot of different apps out there, and sometimes people get confused as to which one does what. So in Premiere, what are some of the advantages of transcriptive that may be coming to Final Cut at some point?
Well, I mean, the big thing with Premiere is that everything's fully integrated into it. So it lives entirely within Premiere. So that opens up a lot more options in terms of using, like Premiere's multicam workflow, or Premiere,
right.
Just built into your regular editing workflow without having to go out to a website and then, import XML files or SRT files or whatever. Everything's kind of just living right there. So that's really kind of the big advantage. And that's why we've really just kind of emphasized Premiere and trying to get that working as well as it could, as opposed to just doing a website version.
So transcriptives, does it actually do audio to text transcription? Yeah.
So one of the big things is, of course, I mean, part of the reason that you're seeing so many companies come up is that the AI speech to text has gotten much better.
Okay.
We launched this in 2017, and that was, it had finally gotten good enough that we felt we could build a professional tool with it. And it's just gotten, the quality of it's just gotten better. And, all the websites that you see using it, including us, are really using a few different AIs from the larger companies, whether it's Microsoft or Google or companies like Speechmatics or Rev. There's really a few vendors that have really high quality speech to text, and everybody's using one of those. Very few companies have their own speech to text, especially in the video editing space. So,
right.
All the apps that you mentioned earlier, they're all using either Google or Speechmatics or
right.
Somebody else.
When you use it in Premiere, can you select an audio file and then it'll transcribe that going somewhere else, but bringing it back in automatically? Is that what happens? The text version? Okay.
Yeah. So you can either, you can transcribe either a sequence, timeline, or you can transcribe an individual clip. So if you've got a whole bunch of clips in your project panel and you want to just transcribe those, and then once those are transcribed, you can drag those into a sequence, and then Transcriptive will automatically see the transcript for those clips. You can make edits, and then Transcriptive will automatically build the transcript for that sequence based on the transcripts you already have. So
okay. And can you search?
Yep.
Does it come in as text files or just specifically?
It's all metadata that's attached to the clips.
Attached to the clip. Okay.
Right. So you can search. We have a kind of secondary panel that is called Powersearch, and that allows you to search every media item in the entire project. So if you've got 100 different clips and you're looking for where your interviewee said this one thing and you don't know where it's at, right. You can just search, and you'll search all of the clips that you have, and it'll find that. So it's a pretty powerful solution with Premiere.
It'll show you the video clip, the video portion with that phrase or whatever.
It doesn't actually show you the video portion. You get search results much like you would in Google, where you've got the time code, the clip name, the text that you're searching for, and then if you click on that, it then opens up that video clip in the source monitor, and then you can just grab that section and drop it into your sequence.
Is the section marked when it opens up in the viewer?
It is not. So you still need to go set in and out points in
time
the
code.
Source mod. Yeah.
Okay.
But it will jump to that. It will jump to the start of that phrase.
Oh, it will.
But then but you still need to go set in point, set out point at the end of the sentence.
Okay.
And then you can insert that into your timeline or sequence or whatever.
But that's a big deal. I mean, just setting the playhead at the beginning. It is setting the playhead at the beginning of that phrase is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's
really
pretty
is.
cool. I mean, that's why it's cool that's why we've focused so much on like doing this integrated solution, because now you're not searching the transcript on a website and then having to go back into Premiere and figure out where the time code is, find the clip. You just do a search, you click on the search result, and it just pops everything open and jumps to the time code. So
I don't know Premiere anymore. It's 2020, 21. Does it have? Can you open up a text file in Premiere? Like if you had, for example, when I get my transcripts, I have time coded, time code. Mm-hmm. But I can't open that up in Final Cut. I have to do it in Text Editor or Notes or something and put it beside Final Cut and copy it over. I mean, the actual text file.
I don't know that you can open a text. You might be able to. I don't know the answer.
Logic has a Notes tab where you can copy and paste entire text documents in there. You can do it per project or per I don't know if it's per track or per project, but you can copy and paste entire, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph inside of it. And Final Cut doesn't have that. I was wondering if Premiere had something like that. But
I don't think it does. I know that, if you have Transcriptive, you can import the transcript into Transcriptive and have all that stuff there.
Okay.
Because you can import. It's AI based if you want the automatic transcription. But if you already have a transcript, you can import that text file into Transcriptive, and it'll work the same way. It's
okay.
We're pretty agnostic about where the text data comes from. It doesn't really matter.
Gotcha.
But I don't think Premiere itself has a notes type panel. If you import a text file, it might be able to open it up, but I don't think you can make edits to it, because I know that if you have if you do an XML import and there are errors, it'll generate a text file, and you can look at that. So I don't know the answer.
Well, I also noticed
it's an enthusiastic maybe.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'd like to see Final Cut get the notes field like that. Like Logic has. I compare Logic and Final Cut because they're both pro apps, right? They're both from the same company. I realize they're two different teams, but I really like that feature in Logic. I use it all the time. I make complete notes. I do my podcast, Final Cut Pro Radio, in Logic, and I do my whole script right in the notes field. I don't have to have a separate. It doesn't seem like it'd be that difficult to open up a text file or a PDF to have your transcript, right there, especially if it's time coded. You can just grab that time code and plug it in, and it'll jump. The playhead will jump to that point. So I think we've covered everything. What else we got to talk about? Plugins wise, post-production wise.
That's mostly it. We have another plugin called Samurai Sharpen that does sharpening for video. We also have a bunch of free plugins up on the website.
Well, that's always nice.
We have the opposite of Beauty Box. So if you want to download Ugly Box, that's a free one.
Really? What? That makes good-looking people not so good-looking?
So if you want to make zombies, it's a great way of
zombies, of course.
So it takes the facial detection and does the same thing that Beauty Box does, builds the automatic mask, but it allows you to accentuate the skin flaws as opposed to improve them. And we didn't think anybody would really want to pay for that, so it's but it's a fun Halloween type of free plugin. So
let me put it up. digitalanarchy.com. So what does the Sharpen do? What does that do? What platforms does that work on?
That's all the platforms that we support. Adobe, Apple, Resolve, and basically what that does is just a very smart sharpening. So there's a bunch of automatic masking tools that are built into it. If you want to just sharpen, like say eyes, and it just gives you a lot of control over how the sharpening looks. So that if you're just trying to sharpen just a small portion of the clip. Because generally with video, you don't want to, over sharpening is
right
a problem. It's deadly.
Especially 4K and 6K and 12K, especially with higher resolutions.
But, it's like if you're trying to up-res HD to like match a 4K shot, then, you might want to apply a bit of a sharpening to it. If you have, a shot that's slightly out of focus that you just want to like add a little bit of
touch it,
sharpening around the eyes just to kind of create the perception of more sharpness. It's a pretty cool plugin for doing that type of thing.
Are your developers that work for you there, everybody working remotely right now?
Yeah, we're all, we're based in the Bay Area, and everybody's kind of working from home. All the engineers kind of worked from home 3 days a week anyways. So
there you go.
It's not a huge change. There's no reason for them to come into the office every day. But, it is, I do miss having people around, and there is something to be said for that face-to-face interaction.
Absolutely.
In terms of just brainstorming and making sure everybody's on the same page and all that. So, we'll definitely go back to having an office in some form or fashion.
So when you get your transcriptor for Final Cut, whenever that happens, you ought to come to the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit.
Yeah, we've been at, I think, all of them, actually.
Oh, you have been?
Yeah, we have a little table there. Yeah, we know the FMC folks pretty well, and yeah, we've been doing those for quite a while. Because we have, even though transcriptive is Premiere centric, all the other plugins are, of course, for FCP. So, and they usually do it in Cupertino, which is just down the road from us. So it's
the Juniper Hotel. That's fantastic. I love that. That everything about it is fantastic. There's plenty of places to eat. The hotel is great. You get up in the morning in the lobby. Everybody's there in the lobby. All the sessions are there. So I hopefully, if NAB happens next October, hopefully they'll have the Creative Summit in November, because both of them are, FMC's involved with both NAB and, of course, the Creative Summit. So fantastic.
Yeah, we'll see what it's like having NAB in October. See how that throws things off, because I think the nice thing about having stuff like Creative Summit in November was that it was a ways away from NAB, and there is the you do get trade show burnout.
Oh, absolutely.
As much as I like seeing folks, it's like NAB is such a big deal. It takes me a couple months to recover.
No, absolutely. But Final Cut Pro Creative Summit is not a trade show. That's the difference, right?
Well, it is a conference, but from our perspective, it's a trade show.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You're
presenting.
Table there, and So.
That's true. Absolutely true. All right, Jim, I certainly thank you for stopping over here and talking about your very, very cool plugins that you have for Final Cut and for Resolve and for Premiere, and some of them for Avid as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Richard. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we will talk to you again.